The cubs howled outside the dorms. The humans said sleep and they snuggled up. The transport ship landed on Cassera Minor with a soft thud. Doyen pressed his face against the small window and looked out at the gray moon below. Everything looked cold and empty. He took a deep breath and picked up his single bag. This was his new home now. The Frontier Training Complex looked bigger than he expected. The main building stretched across the rocky surface like a giant metal snake. Small domes connected to it from all sides. Doyen walked down the ramp and felt the artificial gravity pull at his feet. It was weaker than Earth's gravity. Each step felt strange and bouncy, a tall crystalline being weighted near the entrance. Its body looked like colored glass with light moving inside. This was Instructor Hallex. Next to it floated a creature with many tentacles. That was Administrator Vess. Both looked tired. Very tired. "You are the human," Hallex said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "We expected someone else." "I was the only one who volunteered," Doyen replied. He tried to smile. Vess made a bubbling sound. "Of course. No one else wants this assignment. Come, we will show you why." They walked through long corridors. The walls were smooth and white. Small lights blinked along the ceiling. Doyen heard sounds coming from different rooms. Some were musical. Some were clicking noises. Some were voices speaking in languages he did not know. Then he heard the howling. It started low and rose high. The sound echoed through the entire building. It was angry and sad at the same time. More voices joined in. 4 or 5 of them. They howled together like a terrible song. "The Raxian cubs," Hallex said. "They do this every night. All night. No one can sleep. The other students are exhausted. Some want to leave. What have you tried?" Doyen asked. Vess's tentacles waved in frustration. "Everything. We tried music to calm them. We tried making the rooms darker. We tried giving them more food. We tried exercise programs. Nothing works. They just howl and fight." They reached the dormitory section. Through a large window, Doyen could see the common area. 4 young creatures moved around inside. They looked like a mix between wolves and lizards. Their bodies were covered in scales and thick fur. They had sharp teeth and claws. Even though they were young, they looked dangerous. One of them jumped at another. They rolled across the floor, growling and snapping. A third one paced back and forth near the wall. The 4th one sat in the corner, making sad whimpering sounds. "Those are the cubs," Hallex said. "Striker is the big one with the dark scales. Fang has the white stripe on his face. Shadow is the one pacing. Growl is the small one in the corner." "Why are they called that?" Doyen asked. "The translator picks up their vocalizations and gives them names based on the sounds they make," Vess explained. "We cannot pronounce their real names." Doyen watched the cubs carefully. They were not playing. They were upset. Their movements were full of tension and fear. "Can I see their files?" he asked. Hallex handed him a data pad. Doyen read through the information. The Raxian cubs came from a world called Raxia Prime. They were social predators. They lived in packs. Family groups stayed together their whole lives. Cubs were never left alone until they became adults. "They are scared," Doyen said quietly. "Scared?" Vess's tentacles curled in confusion. "They are predators. They are the ones scaring everyone else. Look at them," Doyen pointed. "They are not calm. They are stressed. That howling is not aggression. It is fear." Hallex's light flickered inside its crystalline body. "We cannot change their nature. They are what they are." "I am not asking you to change their nature," Doyen said. "I am asking you to understand it." They continued the tour. Doyen met some of the other students. A human girl named Heejin worked on the dormitory computer systems. She had dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic keyboard. "The whole system is a mess," she said when Doyen introduced himself. "The Raxian cubs damaged 3 doors last week. They scratched through the wall panels. I have been repairing things every day. Do you have recordings of their behavior?" Doyen asked. Heejin nodded. "Everything is recorded. Do you want to see?" "Yes, please." Another human student appeared in the doorway. Taeyang was thin and quiet. He carried a container full of strange plants. Green and purple leaves grew from the soil inside. "These are for the Velthro students," he explained. "Plants from their home world. It helps them feel less homesick." He looked at Doyen with curiosity. "Are you really going to fix the Raxian problem?" "I am going to try," Doyen said. That evening, Doyen sat in his small quarters and watched the recordings. Hour after hour of footage showed the same pattern. The cubs were fine during the day when other beings were around. But when night came and everyone left them alone, they became upset. The howling started. The fighting began. They destroyed furniture. They scratched at the doors. But Doyen noticed something else. When they fought, they never really hurt each other. When they howled, they looked at the doors as if waiting for someone to come. When they finally exhausted themselves, they huddled together in a corner, pressed against each other. They were not trying to escape. They were not trying to hurt anyone. They were calling for help. They wanted someone to stay with them. Doyen thought about his own childhood. He remembered being afraid of the dark. He remembered calling for his mother. She would come and sit by his bed until he fell asleep. Her presence made the fear go away. These cubs needed the same thing. Not rules. Not technology. They needed someone to stay. The next morning, Doyen went to find Hallex and Vess. They were in the administration office looking through reports. Both looked even more tired than before. "I have an idea," Doyen said. Hallex turned its crystalline body toward him. "We have tried many ideas. Not this one," Doyen said. "I want to sleep in the common area with the cubs." Silence filled the room. Vess's tentacles stopped moving. Hallex's internal light dimmed. "That is dangerous," Hallex said finally. "Those cubs have claws and teeth. They could hurt you badly." "They could," Doyen agreed. "But I do not think they will." "Why would you risk it?" Vess asked. Doyen looked at both of them. "Because I think I understand what they need. On their world, cubs sleep with their pack. Adults stay close to them. Here, we put them alone in a room every night. Of course they are upset. They feel abandoned." "You are applying human thinking to alien creatures," Hallex said. "I am applying pack thinking to pack creatures," Doyen corrected. "Many species have similar needs, humans, Raxians, others. Social creatures need social contact." "It is not complicated," Vess bubbled nervously. "If you get hurt, the Academy will be responsible." "I will sign whatever forms you need," Doyen said. "But I want to try. Give me one night. If it does not work, we will think of something else." Hallex and Vess looked at each other. They seemed to have a silent conversation. Finally, Hallex nodded. "One night," it said, "but we will monitor everything. If you are in danger, we will intervene." "Fair enough," Doyen said. He spent the rest of the day preparing. Hyejin helped him set up extra cameras. Taeyang offered to stay nearby with medical supplies. Other students heard what he was planning and gathered to watch through the windows. As the sun set over Kasara Minor, Doyen picked up a simple sleeping mat and a blanket. He walked toward the Raxian common area. His heart beat fast. He was afraid. But he had to try. The door opened. He stepped inside. The cub stopped moving and turned to look at him. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The cubs howled outside the dorms. The human said, "Sleep," and they snuggled up. The common area was bigger than it looked from outside. The walls were gray metal. Scratch marks covered them in long lines. Broken furniture lay pushed against one corner. The floor was cold under Doyen's feet. 4 pairs of eyes watched him. The cubs did not move at first. They just stared. Doyen could see their muscles tense under their scales and fur. Their tails went stiff. Stryker, the largest one, made a low rumbling sound in his throat. Doyen walked slowly to the center of the room. He did not run. He did not look away. He kept his movements calm and steady. He placed his sleeping mat on the floor and spread his blanket over it. Then he sat down. Stryker took a step forward. His claws clicked on the floor. The sound echoed in the quiet room. Fang circled around to the left. Shadow moved to the right. They were surrounding him like hunters. Doyen felt his heart pound harder. His hands wanted to shake. He forced them to stay still. Growl, the smallest cub, stayed in the corner. He made a soft, whimpering sound. His ears pressed flat against his head. Stryker came closer. He was almost as big as Doyen when standing on all 4 legs. His teeth were long and sharp. He opened his mouth and snapped his jaws together. The sound was loud. It was a threat. A warning. Doyen did not move back. He looked at Stryker but did not stare directly into his eyes. That would be a challenge. Instead, he looked at Stryker's chest. He kept his breathing slow and even. He spoke in a low voice. "It is okay," he said. The words did not matter. The cubs could not understand human language without translators. But tone mattered. Tone was universal. "You are safe. I am not going to hurt you," Stryker growled again. He moved his head from side to side, trying to figure out what this strange creature was doing. Prey animals ran, other staff members stayed far away. But this human just sat there calm and still. Fang sniffed the air. His nose twitched. He could smell Doyen's fear, but also something else. No aggression, no threat, just presence. Shadow stopped pacing. She sat down a few feet away, watching carefully. Her tail flicked back and forth. Minutes passed. Doyen stayed sitting. He did not try to touch the cubs. He did not make sudden movements. He just existed in their space, breathing slowly, projecting calm. Growl made another whimpering sound. It was higher this time, more distressed. Doyen turned his head slightly to look at the small cub. Growl was shaking. His small body trembled against the wall. Doyen understood that sound. It was the same in many languages. It was loneliness. It was fear. It was the cry of a child who wanted comfort. He patted the mat beside him gently. The movement was slow and clear. An invitation, not a command. Growl looked at the other cubs. Stryker was still standing guard. Fang had moved closer but remained cautious. Shadow watched everything with intelligent eyes. Slowly, very slowly, Growl moved forward. His belly stayed low to the ground. His tail tucked between his legs. He crept across the floor one small step at a time. When he reached the edge of the mat, he stopped. He looked up at Doyen with big golden eyes. Doyen smiled. Not a big smile with teeth showing. That might look like a threat. Just a small, gentle curve of his mouth. He nodded once. Growl climbed onto the edge of the mat. He curled his small body into a tight ball. He was touching the mat but not touching Doyen. That was okay. That was progress. Outside the window, Hyejin watched the monitors with wide eyes. Taeyang stood beside her, holding his medical kit tightly. Other students had gathered around them. Everyone stared at the screens. "He is crazy," one student whispered. "He is brave," another said. "Look," Hyejin pointed. "Growl is on the mat." Inside the common area, Doyen did something that made everyone watching gasp. He lay down. He turned on his side with his back partially toward the cubs. He closed his eyes. This was the most vulnerable position possible. He was showing complete trust, complete submission to their space. He was not a threat. He was not trying to dominate. He was simply there. Stryker made a confused sound. This was not normal behavior. This was not how anything else acted around them. He walked closer to Doyen, sniffing. His nose touched Doyen's back. Doyen felt the warm breath through his shirt. He did not move. He kept his eyes closed. He kept breathing slowly. Fang approached next. He sniffed Doyen's feet and legs. His whiskers tickled Doyen's ankle. Then Fang sat down near the mat, not on it, but close enough to be part of the group. Shadow was the most cautious. She circled the mat 3 times before finally settling down on the opposite side from Fang. Her eyes never closed. She was watching, guarding, but she was staying. Stryker remained standing for a long time. He was the pack leader among the cubs. He had responsibilities. He needed to protect the others. He paced around the small group, checking the doors, listening to every sound in the building. But eventually, even Stryker grew tired. The weight of many sleepless nights pulled at him. He looked at Doyen lying peacefully on the mat. He looked at Growl curled up against the human's legs. He looked at Fang and Shadow resting nearby. Finally, Stryker made his decision. He walked to the space between Doyen and the door. He lay down there, positioning his body as a barrier. If anything came through that door, it would have to go through him first. This was his duty. This was his role. Within minutes, Stryker's eyes began to close. His breathing deepened. For the first time in many weeks, he allowed himself to truly rest. The howling did not come that night. In the monitoring room, the gathered students stood in shock. The Raxian common area was completely quiet. 4 cubs and 1 human lay sleeping peacefully. Some of the alien students had tears in their eyes. They understood what this meant. They had been kept awake for so long. Tonight, finally, they could sleep too. Hyejin saved the recordings carefully. She knew this was important. This was history happening. Taeyang put down his medical kit and smiled. "He did it," he whispered. He actually did it. The night passed slowly. Doyen did not truly sleep at first. He stayed aware of everything around him. He felt Growl shift closer until the small cub was pressed against his back. He heard Fang's soft snoring. He sensed Shadow's watchful presence. He knew Stryker was guarding the door. As hours passed and nothing bad happened, Doyen let himself relax more. His muscles unclenched. His breathing became natural. The warmth of the cubs around him was comforting. Despite everything, despite the danger and the strangeness, this felt right. He thought about what Hallex had said, about not applying human thinking to aliens. But this was not human thinking. This was mammalian thinking, pack thinking, social creature thinking. Humans had it. Raxians had it. Probably many species across the galaxy had it. The need to belong, the need for safety, the need to know you are not alone. Technology could not provide that. Rules could not provide that. Only presence could. Only connection. As dawn approached, the artificial lights in the building began to brighten slowly. The cub stirred. Growl lifted his head and yawned, showing all his sharp little teeth. He looked at Doyen with sleepy eyes. Then he made a sound. Not a howl, not a growl, a soft chirping noise. The translator would have called it contentment. Fang stretched, his back arching like a cat. Shadow stood up and shook her whole body. Stryker remained by the door, but his tail wagged slightly. Just a small movement. A sign of peace. Doyen sat up slowly. Every muscle in his body ached from sleeping on the hard floor. But he smiled. He looked at each cub in turn. "Good morning," he said softly. The cubs did not understand the words, but they understood the tone. They understood that something had changed. The fear was less. The anxiety was quieter. For one night they had not been alone. The door opened. Hallex and Vest stood outside looking in with amazement. Other staff members crowded behind them. Hyejin and Taeyang were there too, grinning. "Impossible," Vest breathed. "It actually worked," Stryker growled at the gathering crowd. His protective instincts kicked in. But Doyen stood up and placed a hand gently on Stryker's head. The cub looked up at him and stopped growling. He stayed alert, but he did not attack. "It worked because we gave them what they needed," Doyen said. He was tired. His back hurt. His neck was stiff, but he felt good. He felt like he had done something important. They do not need rules or technology. They need family. The cubs howled outside the dorms. The humans said, "Sleep," and they snuggled up. News traveled fast through the academy. By midday, everyone knew about the human who slept with the Raxian cubs. Students from other dormitories came to see. Staff members whispered in the corridors. Some thought Doyen was brilliant. Others thought he was lucky. A few thought he was insane. Doyen spent the morning in the medical bay getting checked. The doctor, a Velthros with 6 arms, examined him carefully. She looked for scratches, bites, any signs of injury. She found none. "Remarkable," she said, her multiple hands writing notes on different data pads at the same time. "I expected to be treating wounds today. Instead, you are completely fine." "They did not want to hurt me," Doyen explained. "They just wanted comfort." "But they are predators," the doctor said. Their instincts are to protect their pack," Doyen interrupted gently. "I became part of their pack. That is all." After the medical check, Doyen met with Hyejin in the computer room. She had been analyzing the recordings all morning. Charts and graphs covered the screens around her. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Look at this," she pointed to a heart rate monitor. The cubs' stress levels dropped by 70% within the first hour. By the time everyone was asleep, they were in the normal, healthy range for the first time since they arrived here. "What about the other students?" Doyen asked. Hyejin pulled up more data. "Everyone slept better last night. The Velthro students got 8 full hours. The Marioff Young actually left their rooms this morning. They have been too scared to do that for weeks." Taeyang arrived carrying a tray of food. He handed Doyen a sandwich. "You must be hungry. You did not eat dinner last night." Doyen accepted the food gratefully. "Thank you." He took a bite and looked at both of them. "I need to do this again tonight. But I also need to figure out a long-term solution. I cannot sleep on that floor forever." "Why not?" Taeyang asked. "If it works." "Because one person cannot solve everything," Doyen said. "What if I get sick? What if I need to leave? The cubs cannot depend only on me. We need a real system." The 3 of them talked for hours. They discussed ideas. They looked at research about pack animals. They studied the Academy's rules and resources. Slowly, a plan began to form. That afternoon, a message came through the communication system. The Raxian delegation wanted to visit. They would arrive tomorrow. They wanted to see the human who fixed their cubs. Hallex called Doyen to the administration office. Vess floated nervously around the room, tentacles twisting together. "This is a very important visit," Hallex said. "The Raxians are powerful. They are proud. If they are not satisfied with what they see, they will remove their cubs from the academy." "What do they want to see?" Doyen asked. "Proof that their young are safe and respected," Vess explained. "Proof that we understand their needs. Proof that last night was not just luck." "It was not luck," Doyen said firmly. "I can show them that." That evening, Doyen returned to the common area. The cubs recognized him immediately. Growl ran forward and bumped his head against Doyen's leg. It was a greeting. A sign of affection? Stryker watched from across the room, his tail swaying slowly. Doyen set up his mat again. This time he brought a small cushion for his head. Heejin had suggested it, no reason to be completely uncomfortable. He also brought a data pad with information about Raxian culture. He wanted to learn more. He wanted to understand these cubs better. The second night went even smoother than the first. The cubs did not test him this time. Growl immediately curled up on the mat. Fang lay down nearby. Shadow settled in close. Stryker took his position by the door, but something was different tonight. The cubs were more relaxed. They did not watch Doyen with suspicious eyes. They accepted his presence as normal, as right. Stryker even closed his eyes before complete darkness fell. He trusted Doyen to stay. In the middle of the night, Doyen woke up to a strange feeling. Something heavy pressed against his back. He turned his head carefully and saw Stryker. The big cub had moved from the door and was now lying against Doyen, using him as a pillow. His breathing was deep and peaceful. Doyen smiled in the darkness. This was trust. This was acceptance. Stryker, the leader and protector, felt safe enough to rest completely. That meant everything. Morning came with soft sounds. The cubs woke up slowly, stretching and yawning. They were not aggressive or anxious. They were just young creatures starting a new day. Doyen sat up and rubbed his sore neck. 2 nights on the floor was already taking a toll on his body. He was not as young as he used to be. The door opened. But this time it was not the staff coming to check on him. 4 Raxian adults stood in the doorway. They were huge, twice the size of the cubs. Their scales gleamed like armor. Their eyes were sharp and intelligent. The lead Raxian wore decorative bands around his arms. This was warrior scholar Krethax, the head of the delegation. The cubs immediately ran to the adults, making excited chirping sounds. The Raxians lowered their heads and nuzzled the cubs gently. It was a family reunion. But their eyes kept moving back to Doyen. He stood up slowly and bowed his head in respect. He had read that Raxians valued proper greetings. "Welcome," he said. "I am Doyen, the new xenobiologist." Krethax stepped forward. He was even more impressive up close. Scars marked his scales, evidence of many battles. His voice was deep and rumbling. "You are the human who sleeps with our young." "Yes," Doyen answered simply. "Why?" It was a direct question. Raxians did not waste time with small talk. Doyen appreciated that, because they needed someone to stay with them. "On your world, cubs are not left alone at night. Here we were doing that. It was wrong, so I fixed it." Krethax studied him with intense eyes. "You are small, weak, not a warrior. Why did our cubs accept you?" "Because I respected them," Doyen said. "I did not try to dominate them. I did not try to control them. I just offered to be present, to be part of their pack. They chose to accept me." One of the other Raxians, a female with silver markings, spoke. "Show us tonight, we will watch. If you can do this while we observe, we will believe you." Doyen felt his stomach tighten. This would be harder. The cubs would sense the watching eyes. They would be tense and nervous. But he nodded. "I will do my best." The Raxians left to tour the rest of the facility. Doyen spent the day preparing mentally. Heejin set up the monitoring equipment to allow the Raxian delegation to watch from another room. Taeyang offered words of encouragement. Other students wished him luck. As evening approached, Doyen felt nervous. More nervous than the first night. Back then he only had to worry about the cubs. Now he had to prove himself to their entire species. He entered the common area with his mat and blanket. The cubs were already agitated. They could sense something was different. The energy in the building had changed. Adult Raxians were nearby. That made them excited but also uncertain. Stryker paced back and forth, his claws clicking rapidly. Fang whined and scratched at the walls. Shadow growled at shadows that were not there. Even little Growl seemed tense, his ears flat against his head. Doyen set up his mat as usual. But when he sat down, the cubs did not approach. They stayed far away, moving restlessly around the room. Stryker kept looking at the door where his people had entered earlier. In the observation room, the Raxian delegation watched the monitors. Krethax's expression was unreadable. "The cubs are unsettled," he observed. "This will not work tonight," but Doyen did not give up. He understood what was happening. The cubs were caught between two worlds. Their biological family was nearby, but they had also started to bond with Doyen. They did not know which pack to belong to. He needed to make it clear. Stryker suddenly rushed at Doyen. It was not a playful approach. It was a challenge. The cub's lips pulled back from his teeth. He growled low and aggressive. He was testing. In front of his kind, in front of his elders, he needed to know where he stood. In the observation room, the female Raxian tensed. "The cub will attack," she said, but Krethax held up a hand. "Wait, watch," Stryker lunged. Doyen did not run. He did not freeze in fear. Instead, he stood up and stepped forward to meet the charge. He caught Stryker firmly around the middle, his arms wrapping around the cub's body. Stryker snapped and snarled, but Doyen held on, not hurting, not squeezing too tight, just holding, containing, showing strength without violence. The cubs howled outside the dorms. The human said, "Sleep," and they snuggled up. Doyen held Stryker until the cub stopped struggling. It took almost a full minute. Stryker twisted and pushed, trying to break free, but Doyen's grip stayed firm and steady. He spoke in a low, calm voice the entire time. Not angry words. Not threatening. Just constant, reassuring sounds. Finally, Stryker went still. His body relaxed in Doyen's arms. He made a soft huffing sound. Submission. Acceptance. Doyen released him immediately. He did not make it into a bigger moment than necessary. He simply let go and sat back down on his mat as if nothing important had happened. As if this was just a normal part of their relationship. Stryker stood there for a moment, looking confused. Then he walked over to the mat and lay down right next to Doyen. Not at his feet, not across the room. Right beside him, their bodies touching. In the observation room, Krethax made a sound of surprise. The other Raxians leaned forward, their eyes wide. "Did you see that?" the female whispered. "The human he just established pack order, like an adult Raxian. But he is not Raxian," another delegate said. "He is soft, small. He should not be able to do that." Krethax's tail swayed thoughtfully. "He did not use violence. He used confidence, control, that is advanced pack management. Most young Raxians cannot do that." Inside the common area, the other cubs watched what happened. They saw Stryker challenge and submit. They saw the human remain calm and strong. One by one, they approached the mat. Growl came first, as always. Then Shadow. Finally Fang. All four cubs settled down around Doyen. Doyen lay down among them. His heart was still beating fast from the confrontation, but he did not show it. He closed his eyes and breathed slowly. Within minutes, the sound of soft snoring filled the room. The Raxian delegation watched in silence for a long time. They saw their cubs sleep peacefully. They saw the human stay exactly where he promised to stay. They saw something they did not expect to see from another species. "This human understands pack bonds," Krethax said finally. "He may not be Raxian, but he thinks like one. Our cubs are safe with him." The female delegate nodded slowly. "More than safe. They are thriving. Look at Growl. When he first came here, he was so afraid. Now he sleeps like he has no worries in the world." They left the observation room and went to meet with Hallex and Vess. The conversation lasted for hours. The Raxians had many questions. How did Doyen learn to do this? Could he teach others? What was the long-term plan for the cubs' care? Hallex and Vess answered as best they could. But truthfully, they did not fully understand what Doyen was doing either. They just knew it worked. In the morning, the cubs woke up refreshed and energetic. They played together in the common area, wrestling and chasing each other. But it was different from the aggressive fighting they used to do. This was real play. Happy play. Healthy play. Doyen woke up stiff and sore. 3 nights on a hard floor was definitely his limit. He needed a better sleeping arrangement if this was going to continue. He made a mental note to talk to Heejin about getting a proper bed moved into the common area. Krethax and his delegation entered the room. The cubs immediately rushed to greet their elders again. The adult Raxians inspected each cub carefully, checking their scales, their eyes, their overall health. They seemed satisfied with what they saw. "Your cubs are doing well," Doyun said. "They are good students. Smart and strong." Krethax turned to look at him. "You have done what we thought was impossible, human. You have given our young what they need in this strange place. For that we are grateful." "I only did what was obvious," Doyun replied. "They needed family. So I tried to be family." "It is not obvious to everyone," Krethax said. "Many species do not understand pack bonds. They try to use technology or rules to solve problems that require connection." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "We will allow our cubs to remain at the academy, but we have conditions." "What conditions?" Alex asked nervously. The administrator had entered the room quietly, along with Vess. "First, this human must continue to care for our cubs. If he leaves, we leave." Doyun nodded. "I can do that." "Second, you must train others in your methods. One person is not enough. What if you become ill? What if you need rest? Others must learn to do what you do." "I agree," Doyun said. "I was already planning to suggest that." "Third," Krethax continued, "we want you to help redesign the entire dormitory system. Not just for Raxian cubs, for all species. Many of your students are suffering because this place does not meet their needs. You understand connection. You understand pack. Use that knowledge to help everyone." Alex's crystalline body flickered with surprise. That would be a massive project. It would require approval from the education committee. It would need funding and resources and— "Then get those things," Krethax said firmly. "The Raxian government will support this proposal. We will provide resources. We will send experts, but the human must lead the project. He has proven he understands what the others do not." Vess's tentacles twisted nervously. "Doyun is not officially qualified for such a position. He is just a xenobiologist. He does not have administrative experience or—" "He has something more important than qualifications," the female Raxian interrupted. "He has wisdom. He has empathy. He sees the obvious truths that educated minds ignore. That is what you need here." Over the following days, everything changed at the Frontier Training Complex. Doyun was officially promoted to Director of Interspecies Student Welfare. It was a newly created position with a broad mandate to improve conditions for all students. Hyejin became his assistant, handling the technical and data aspects of their work. Taeyang joined the team as well, using his knowledge of different species' environmental needs to design better living spaces. They started by conducting interviews with every student in the dormitory. They asked simple questions. What do you miss from home? What makes you feel safe? What scares you? What do you need? The answers were heartbreaking and enlightening. The Velthro students missed the smell of their home soil. The Mariuf young felt isolated because they needed to be surrounded by water. The crystalline children from the outer rim experienced constant temperature discomfort because the dormitory was designed for carbon-based life forms. Every species had needs that were not being met. Not because the academy did not care, but because no one had asked. No one had thought to connect the rules and technology to the basic emotional and physical requirements of living beings. Doyun, Hyejin, and Taeyang worked long hours. They redesigned room layouts. They created species-specific environmental zones. They established mixed-group social areas where different species could interact safely. Most importantly, they created a mentor program where older students and staff members would provide emotional support to younger students. The Raxian delegation stayed to help. Krethax himself taught a workshop on pack dynamics and social hierarchy. The female Raxian, whose name translated to Gentle Fang, worked with other predator species to help them adapt to the dormitory environment. Slowly, the entire atmosphere of the Frontier Training Complex changed. Students who had been withdrawn started emerging from their rooms. Fighting decreased. Cooperation increased. Academic performance improved across all species. But the biggest change was in the Raxian cubs. They were no longer the problem children of the dormitory. They became helpers. Stryker, with his natural leadership abilities, started organizing playgroups for different species. Fang became friends with a shy Velthro student and helped him feel less homesick. Shadow and Growl worked together to welcome new students when they arrived. The cubs were thriving because someone had given them what they needed, and now they were helping others thrive too. Doyen still slept in the common area with the cubs, but now he had a proper bed. Hyejin had arranged for a comfortable cot to be moved in. She also installed better lighting and heating controls so Doyen could adjust the environment for better sleep. Other changes came too. Hallex, the crystalline instructor, started spending more time with students instead of just teaching from a distance. Vess became less rigid about rules and more focused on results. The entire staff learned from Doyen's example. One evening, as Doyen settled into his cot with the 4 cubs arranged around him on their own sleeping mats, he reflected on everything that had happened. Just a few weeks ago, he had been a volunteer nobody wanted. Now he was leading a revolution in interspecies education, but he did not think of it as a revolution. He thought of it as common sense. Beings need connection. They need safety. They need to know they belong. These were not complicated ideas. They were simple truths that applied across the galaxy. Stryker yawned and stretched, his claws extending and retracting. Growl made his soft chirping sound of contentment. Shadow and Fang were already asleep, curled up together. "Good night," Doyen whispered to them. Outside, the gray moon of Kasara Minor reflected the light of distant stars. Inside, the dormitory was quiet and peaceful. No howling, no fighting, just the gentle sounds of young beings sleeping safely, knowing they were not alone. 3 months had passed since Doyen first slept with the Raxian cubs. The Frontier Training Complex looked different now. New sections had been added to the main building. Each one was designed for specific species needs. The Mariof young had their water-filled habitat. The Velthro students had soil gardens from their homeworld. The crystalline children had temperature-controlled chambers. But the biggest change was not physical. It was social. Students from different species now ate meals together. They studied in mixed groups. They played games that combined rules from multiple cultures. The dormitory had become a real community. Doyen stood in his small office looking at reports on his datapad. Academic scores were up by 30% across all species. Behavioral incidents had dropped by 75%. Parent satisfaction ratings had improved dramatically. The numbers told a clear story. The changes were working. A knock on the door interrupted his reading. Hyejin entered carrying a large folder of documents. Her expression was serious. "The Galactic Federation Education Committee is coming," she said. "Next week. They want to do a full inspection of the facility." Doyen put down his datapad. "Is that good or bad?" "I am not sure," Hyejin admitted. "They sent a message saying they have received many reports about our program. Some positive, some negative. They need to see for themselves before making any decisions." "What kind of decisions?" Hyejin hesitated. "Whether to expand our model to other facilities, or whether to shut us down for violating standard educational protocols." Doyen felt his stomach tighten. "Shut us down? But we are successful. The students are happy and healthy. Success is not always enough," Hyejin said quietly. "We broke a lot of rules to get here. We redesigned everything without official approval. We created new positions without proper authorization. We spent money that was allocated for other purposes. Technically, we did many things wrong. We did the right things," Doyen said firmly. "I know. But bureaucracy does not always care about right and wrong. It cares about procedures and regulations." She set the folder on his desk. "These are all the documents they requested. Financial reports, student records, staff evaluations, everything. We need to prepare for their visit." Over the next week, the entire facility prepared for the inspection. Halls were cleaned until they shined. Reports were organized and double-checked. Students were nervous. Staff members worried about their jobs. Even the Raxian cubs seemed to sense the tension in the air. The night before the inspection, Doyen could not sleep. He lay on his cot in the common area, staring at the ceiling. The cubs were restless, too. Stryker paced near the door. Growl whimpered softly. Shadow and Fang kept standing up and lying down again. "I know," Doyen said to them. "I am worried, too." Stryker walked over and pressed his head against Doyen's hand. It was a gesture of comfort. The cub was trying to make the human feel better. Doyen smiled despite his anxiety. These cubs had grown so much. They were no longer the frightened, aggressive creatures he first met. They were confident young beings who cared about others. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you will be okay," Doyen promised them. "I will make sure of it." Morning came too quickly. The education committee arrived in an official transport ship. 5 members stepped out. 3 were humanoid species. 2 were completely alien. They all wore formal clothing and carried data pads. Their faces showed no emotion. The lead inspector was a tall woman with blue skin and silver hair. Her name was Administrator Solon. She spoke with a crisp, professional voice. "We are here to conduct a comprehensive review of the Frontier Training Complex. Please show us your facilities and provide access to all requested records." Hallex and Vess gave the official tour. They showed the new habitat sections. They explained the redesigned curriculum. They presented student performance data. The committee members took notes but asked few questions. Their expressions remained neutral. Then they asked to see the students. All of them. Together. The staff assembled everyone in the main common area. Students from a dozen different species gathered nervously. The Raxian cubs stood close to Doyen. Stryker positioned himself between Doyen and the inspectors, his protective instincts on full alert. Administrator Solon looked around the room. "We want to speak with students privately. Without staff present, we need to hear their true experiences, not rehearsed statements." Hallex looked worried. "Some of our students are very young. They may be frightened without familiar adults nearby." "That is the point," Solon said. "We need to see how they actually feel, how they really behave." Reluctantly, Doyen and the other staff members left the room. They waited in the hallway, listening to muffled voices through the door. Minutes felt like hours. What were the students saying? Were they scared? Would they say the wrong things? Finally, after almost an hour, the door opened. The committee members emerged. Their expressions were still unreadable. "We would like to observe the evening routine," Administrator Solon announced, "particularly the sleeping arrangements for the Raxian cubs. We have read reports about your unusual methods, Director Doyen. We need to see them ourselves." That evening, the entire committee gathered in the observation room. Hyojin set up the monitors so they could see everything clearly. Taeyang stood nearby, his hands fidgeting nervously. Other staff members waited in the hall. Doyen entered the common area with his usual sleeping mat and blanket. The cubs were more agitated than normal. They could sense all the watching eyes. Stryker growled at the observation window even though he could not see through it. His instincts told him they were being watched. "It is okay," Doyen said softly. "Just another night." Nothing is different, but the cubs did not settle. They paced and whined. Shadow scratched at the walls. Fang howled, a sound they had not made in months. Growl pressed himself into a corner, trembling. In the observation room, one of the inspectors shook his head. "This is what we were warned about. The cubs are distressed. This living arrangement is clearly not working." Administrator Solon held up a hand. "Wait, watch what happens." Doyen sat down on his mat. He did not try to force the cubs to come to him. He did not call them or make demands. He simply sat there breathing calmly, projecting peace and patience. He had learned that you cannot rush trust. You can only offer it and wait. Slowly, very slowly, Growl moved away from the corner. He crawled across the floor toward Doyen, his belly low. When he reached the mat, he climbed onto Doyen's lap and pressed his face against Doyen's chest. The small cub was seeking comfort from his fear. Doyen wrapped his arms around Growl gently. He rocked slightly, the way a parent might rock a scared child. He hummed a soft tune. No words, just sound. Just presence. Fang stopped howling. He watched Growl in Doyen's arms. Then he approached too, settling down beside the mat. Shadow followed. Finally, even Stryker walked over. The big cub lay down directly in front of Doyen, still in a protective position, but calm now. Doyen lay down with Growl still curled against his chest. The other cubs arranged themselves around him. Within 10 minutes, all of them were asleep. In the observation room, silence filled the space. The inspectors looked at each other. Finally, Administrator Solon spoke. "I have never seen anything like that. Those cubs trust him completely. That level of cross-species bonding should not be possible." "But it is possible," Hyejin said quietly from where she stood by the monitors. "Because Director Doyen does not see them as just alien creatures. He sees them as young beings who need care. It is that simple." The next day, the committee conducted final interviews. They spoke with Hallex and Vess about administrative challenges. They reviewed financial records with the accounting staff. They examined every detail of the program. Finally, they called everyone together for their main common area. The tension was unbearable. This moment would decide everything. Administrator Solon stood at the front of the room. Her face was still neutral. We have completed our review of the Frontier Training Complex. We have examined your methods, your results, and your impact on students from multiple species." She paused. Everyone held their breath. "What you have done here is highly irregular. You violated numerous protocols. You ignored established procedures. You made changes without proper authorization." Doyen felt his hope sinking. This was it. They were going to shut everything down. But then Administrator Solon smiled. It was the first emotion she had shown since arriving. "You also achieved something extraordinary. You created a model of interspecies education that actually works. Not on paper, not in theory, in practice, with real students showing real improvement." She looked around the room at all the gathered faces. "The Galactic Federation Education Committee has made a decision. Not only will this program continue, we are designating the Frontier Training Complex as a pilot program for a new model of interspecies education. Other facilities will study your methods. Director Doyen will be asked to train staff from across the galaxy." Cheers erupted in the room. Students from different species made sounds of joy in their own languages. Staff members hugged each other. Heejin had tears running down her face. Taeyang pumped his fist in the air. The Raxian cubs howled. But this time it was not a sound of fear or aggression. It was celebration. It was victory. Stryker stood on his back legs and roared toward the ceiling. Administrator Solon raised her hand. "That works perfectly," Doyen agreed. The celebration continued into the evening. Students from different species shared food from their cultures. The Velthros students performed a traditional dance. The Marioff young created water sculptures in the air. The Raxian cubs wrestled playfully while adults watched with pride. Heijin found Doyen standing by a window looking out at the stars. "You could have taken that job," she said. "Why did you say no?" Doyen smiled. "Because I learned something important here. Change does not happen from the top down. It happens from the ground up. I can do more good here with these students than I could ever do at headquarters pushing papers and attending meetings." "You really care about them," Heijin observed. "Of course I do. They are not just my job. They are my responsibility. My family." He looked back at the celebration. "That is what humans do best, I think. We form connections. We build bridges. We see past the surface differences to the basic needs underneath. That is our strength." Taeyang joined them by the window. "The inspectors want to interview us about our methods. They want detailed documentation of everything we did. It is going to be a lot of work." "Good," Doyen said. "Let us make sure we explain it properly. Not just what we did, but why we did it. The theory behind the practice. That way others can adapt it to their own situations." Over the following months, the Frontier Training Complex became a center of learning for adult educators, not just students. Staff members from dozens of facilities came to observe. They watched how Doyen interacted with the cubs. They studied the redesigned dormitory systems. They learned about putting emotional needs before regulations. Some visitors were skeptical at first. They questioned whether one person's methods could be replicated. They worried about safety. They cited rules and protocols that would be violated. But then they saw the results. They saw happy students. They saw improved academic performance. They saw species working together who should have been natural enemies. They saw cubs who used to howl in fear now sleeping peacefully. One visiting administrator from a distant system pulled Doyen aside after a week of observation. She was a Quarren like Halix, her crystalline body pulsing with soft blue light. "I do not understand how you do it," she admitted. "I have been an educator for 30 years. I know all the theories, all the best practices, but I never achieved what you have achieved here. What is your secret?" Doyen thought about the question carefully. "It is not a secret. It is just remembering that every student is a person, not a problem to solve, not a number in a report, a person with feelings and fears and needs. When you remember that, everything else becomes clear." "But we are taught to maintain professional distance," the administrator protested. "We are told not to get too emotionally involved." "There is a difference between professional distance and emotional walls," Doyen explained. "You can care about someone while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. In fact, I think you must care. How can you help someone if you do not care whether they succeed or suffer?" The administrator's light pulsed thoughtfully. "This is not how we are trained to think at the Federation schools." "Maybe that is what needs to change," and Doyen suggested gently. As seasons passed on Kasera Minor, the cubs grew. They were no longer small and helpless. Stryker was nearly the size of an adult Raxian. Fong had developed impressive speed and agility. Shadow showed remarkable intelligence. Even little Growl, who would always be the smallest, had become confident and brave. But they still slept near Doyun every night. The bond they formed in those early difficult days remained strong. They were his pack. He was their den father. That would never change, no matter how big they grew. One evening, as Doyun prepared for sleep, Stryker approached him. The young Raxian carried something in his mouth. It was a small carved stone. Stryker placed it carefully in Doyun's hand. "What is this?" Doyun asked, examining the object. It was shaped like a claw and polished smooth. Krethax, who was visiting that week, explained. "It is a pack marker. Cubs give them to adults they consider family. It means Stryker claims you as his own. You are Raxian now in his eyes. In all their eyes." Doyun felt emotion tighten his throat. He looked at the 4 cubs gathered around him. They were not his biological children. They were not even his species. But they were his family, and he was theirs. "I am honored," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "I will treasure this always." That night, as Doyun lay down to sleep with his pack around him, he thought about how far they had all come. He had arrived at this facility as an unwanted volunteer. A last choice, a desperate solution to an impossible problem. But sometimes, he had learned, the impossible just needs a different approach. Sometimes the solution is not more rules or better technology. Sometimes it is just presence, just care, just someone willing to stay when everyone else walks away. Outside the dormitory windows, the stars shined bright against the darkness. Inside, peace filled every corner. The cubs no longer howled in fear. They no longer fought in confusion. They slept secure in the knowledge that they belonged, that they were safe, that they were loved. And Doyun slept too, knowing that he had found his purpose, not in some grand mission across the galaxy, not in prestigious positions at headquarters, but here in this small dormitory on a gray moon, teaching others what humanity did best, building bridges, forming connections, choosing empathy over efficiency, choosing understanding over protocol, choosing to stay when it would be easier to leave. The cubs breathed softly in the darkness. Stryker's tail twitched in dreams. Fong's ear flicked at imaginary sounds. Shadow shifted closer to the warmth. Growl made his soft chirping sound of complete contentment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More students would arrive. More staff would come to learn. More systems would need changing. The work would never truly be finished. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The cubs were home. The students were safe. The community was strong. And the human who once slept on a cold floor just to prove a point now rested on a comfortable bed, surrounded by beings who loved him in the only way they knew how, with complete trust, with absolute loyalty, with the fierce devotion of a pack that would never abandon one of its own. The howling had stopped long ago. In its place was something better, something that needed no translation across species or language. The sound of family, the sound of belonging, the sound of home.